Hey, this is Scott from Carnifex, and you're listening to Interview Under Fire.
All right. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another new edition of Interview Under Fire. This is your host and Sunny, as always. And today I am so stoked to welcome back a viciously talented frontman, Scott Ian Lewis. It's an honor again, man. Always great to have you here on IUF. You know, we're once again coming up on a big moment of the year for you and the rest of the guys over at the Mighty Carnifex with the release of your new album, Necromanteum, unleashing October 6th through Nuclear Blast Records. Now, Scott, I do want to first commend you on 18 years of brutality, ninth album now in this band's discography. There's that level of consistency, man. A lot to talk about this record. But before we get to everything, right? I know it's been a minute, about 2 years since we last got together and talked about what we love most about the music. And then there you had several insane tours alongside an album anniversary tour, I believe. You've been busy, man. How are you? I don't think I asked you that yet. We got some catching up with you, man.
I'm doing great. Yeah, I think you summed it up with busy. Ever since we got on the other side of the pandemic, we hit the ground running, and we haven't really let up. We've been super busy, and this last year and a half, whenever we weren't on tour, we were working on this record, and then we went into the studio and recorded the whole thing, and now we're doing all the press for it, and then we get right back on the road in October. So we're grinding.
Man, it's so good to see you doing what you're doing. I know dropping an album in the midst of all this makes it that much more exciting, I imagine. I know last time we did this with Graveside, you dropped it during a pandemic. I'm sensing the vibe is a little different this time around, right? With the surrounding and album release.
Definitely, yeah. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, doing the record during the pandemic, it was a good experience just because it was so different and weird from every other record we did.
Yeah.
But I much prefer not being in a pandemic and doing an album. So yeah, it's been much better this time around.
Scott, here's the thing, man. With this album, I'm gonna say this: pumpkin spice is back at Dunkin' Donuts, okay? And I was listening to Necromanteum once Nuclear Blast sent it to me while prepping for our interview. I felt like it was October again. That's my birthday month. I told Sean this last time he was here. He's like, yeah, this is the best time of the year for you, man. It's such a nice guy, by the way. The symphonic and death metal and like deathcore elements that you guys have incorporated with ease into your music. It just sounds so natural. It's hot here in Texas. We're about to reach 110 today, but I felt the chill of fall air during this album experience with Necromanteum. And following up, I do want to switch subjects here because following up on a subject we spoke about last time, Scott, aside from the work you do right behind the mic, you have just as much talent with a pen. I want to remind our listeners that you are also a writer, because where you derive that side of your personal experiences and influences from different filmmakers. And I went to film school, so you're talking to the right person here. And writers like, I believe, Andrew Kevin Walker and Alan Ball, Hitchcock comes into mind, Fincher. You have that 54-page graphic novel, right? Death Dreamer. Any thoughts on future writings that you've been up to? I know we talked about this heavily last time, and I was very intrigued by it. I don't think we had enough time to dive in this a little bit more, but tell me about how Death Dreamer has been going. The reception's been going since we last spoke. It's been 2 years, but
yeah.
What else is going on with
that? Getting Death Dreamer out was awesome because it gave me a chance to write it in a different form. Obviously, I love writing lyrics. I love writing songs, but it is a very specific format that is a bit limiting if you want to write narrative fiction. I mean, of course, you could have like a concept album, but it's not like you get dialogue in a record. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, I had originally written Death Dreamer as a television pilot, and shopped it around, tried to get people interested. But what you come to find out about TV and film industries, it's super similar to the music industry in that just like a band can have a great demo, it doesn't necessarily mean anything's happening. You have to know the right person. You got to know the money man, the person that can say, okay, green light, we're going to finance this, go in the studio and make your record, or, go out and shoot your show. Um, both of them don't have a whole lot to do with how good of an artist or writer you are, and they have a lot more to do with who you happen to meet, timing, etc.
Yeah.
So because I wasn't able to make a whole lot of headway getting it made as a television show, I decided, well, you know what? I'm just going to driver's seat and I'll release it as a graphic novel. And so I did it independently. We did a crowdfund for it, and I was able to release part one of the series, of the Death Dreamer series. And since then, the book is actually sold out. So I had printed 2,500 copies, and we sold all of them. Actually, I have four of them left, and they're sitting in my office, and that's about it. I'm hanging on to those ones. And fairly recently, we're the wheels are turning on it right now. I had written part two, and just prior to the pandemic, we had started working on part two with my artist, the guy that does illustrations. Obviously, the pandemic derailed us,
Hmm.
but now that it's passed, we're back to working on it, and we actually looks like we have a publisher now. And the
Bro.
exciting thing about this is, yeah, so I had been doing it independently, which I'm doing it with money I make on the road. So I wasn't able to release the whole series at once. I was just going book by book. But it looks like the publisher wants to do the whole series in one big book. So which is super awesome. It looks like that's happening. So right now I'm finishing the script for the rest of the story. And it was originally supposed to be a trilogy. So I'm writing basically a third script. I'd already had the second one ready. And then we're going to compile the whole thing into one big book. And the idea is, no guarantees yet, but the idea is that's going to come out in 24.
Oh my
So
God.
some headway's happening. It took a minute because of the pandemic,
Yeah.
shook everything up. And it looks like the series will be coming out in a single anthology in 24. So that's what we're working on right now.
Any chance that you're gonna bring part one of Death Streamer on the road with on this tour for fans to divulge in?
I It's sold out. I had been doing that. I had been bringing copies
Yeah.
of the book with me to sell, but we sold all the copies, and I'm not going to print a second run if we're about to go and do this full series as one book. So hopefully by 24, when the full book's out, I'll be bringing that one with me.
Dude, that's so great to see, and I'm really happy that I'm really proud, almost like a proud moment to see where you started to where you are now. You were vaguely talking about part two when we last spoke, and we didn't know what was going to happen. Obviously, this was 2 years ago, but everything that you just told me, right, Scott? Being an author, does that provide you with an escape that you really can't reach as a musician? Probably, in other words, an extension of who you are.
It does. It definitely does. Because with the band, there's certain expectations and themes that you kind of need to embrace in order to give the audience what they're counting on.
Hmm.
Um, and then the narrative, dialogue, set pieces, like emotional climaxes. You don't really get to do that necessarily in the same way as you do with music. Um, I mean, obviously, certain parts of those elements can be there, but it's a very different format.
Yeah.
And I love television and film, and I've been writing scripts now since 2012, so it's something I've been working on for a while, and I'm just starting to feel like I'm getting okay at it now. There's that saying, it takes 10 years to get good at anything, and I think I'm over the 10-year hump, and I feel like I'm actually kind of starting to get good at screenwriting now. So it's been very enjoyable these last 2 years.
You got me rethinking my philosophies now, everything that I think I'm good at. Now I got some time to catch on. It's like
Well,
podcasting, interviewing. I'm even writing scripts. I have a script that this
yeah,
thick that I haven't given
damn.
to anyone. I've been writing that for like 6 years. I went to film school for 3 years. So that, I mean, when you're talking about your growth and your development as a writer, and I'm thinking, man, it takes a lot of hard work and dedication to your craft, and I can see that, like rounding you out as a person, as an artist, from a singer, from an author. I think that's so cool to see, and you're going to present this to all your fans, probably showing a side to your fans that they've never seen from you, which is really cool. So I don't know how you feel about that, but that's getting the whole glimpse of
I'm
who Scott
excited.
Lewis is. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited, and I have other obviously I have other scripts outside of Death Dreamer, so I've been writing. I tried to stay fairly busy through the pandemic writing.
Yeah.
And the thing about screenwriting is like nobody's asking you to do it. So you
Yeah.
have to be self-motivated. And sometimes it can be a slog, like
Hmm.
you,
I
you
know
know,
that.
like your
Rewrites
idea
and
initially.
rewrites and rewrites all over again. Yeah.
Hey, I remember hearing something early on when I started writing, which is writing is rewriting. And you
Hmm.
know what? That's actually true. Writing is rewriting. And I realized that the hardest draft is that first one, the vomit draft. If you can just get your beginning, your middle, your end, your characters, and something close to the roadmap that script's going to follow, if you can just get to the end, then you go back and you start rewriting and editing. Like you've done most of the work at that point. It's just that first draft, it can suck. Even if you have a great idea and you love the characters, sometimes they're just like, I don't know, like, what am I even writing right here?
So on top of that, this was now I feel like I have to ask you this now because as a writer,
Mhm.
let's say you finish the draft, right? And you kind of just let it sit and sit and sit. But what happens during that time? Your life changes. You
Mhm.
watch different things. You're interested in, different themes and maybe different elements in your life that you're exposed to. How it's so hard with now that you have that experience. Now I got to go back and I should have done it this way. Do you fall into that trap? Like you're in a different state of mind, I feel like, than you were 2 years ago. Has Death
Oh, it's
Dreamer
definitely true.
evolved,
Yeah, it has, and I think a big part of that is I became a better writer just
Yeah.
because I stayed focused on it, and also, the first Death Dreamer book I wrote that script in 2018.
Gosh,
So
yeah. We're in a
what are we
different time
talking
now.
5 years, and so I've grown a lot, I've changed a lot, I've learned more as a writer. I've been reading other people's writing, more. Obviously, the experience of the pandemic gave me a lot of insight I didn't have previously. So yeah, I mean, things are always evolving, and yeah, there's certain things I look at in the first book, and I kind of go, I could have done that better, or like, man, I could have set myself up for
Yeah.
something else a little better here, but that's kind of being a good writer is really you're just solving problems. So I tried to just look at it like that and say, okay, maybe I didn't write the perfect script for part one, but it's okay. I can solve all these problems in part two and three. And I'm sure another couple of years will pass, and I'll look back and say I could have done this, that, and that better. The same holds true for music. I look at the early records and I go, oh, whoa, I could have done that better. But that's the thing about being an artist. You have to be able to put something out and let it go and move on. You can't think that this is the only good idea and hold on to it forever. You got to put it out, say it is what it is. Now I'm going to go write something better. I'm going to go write something better. And you just have to keep saying that through your
Yeah.
career.
I don't know. Your first albums are pretty good, man. But this is coming from a fan perspective.
No, I know they're good and they're fun, but like if you're thinking at it like because as an artist, you have to be able to critique yourself and
Yeah,
self edit
very
and
true.
recognize what is worthwhile and what's not. And so I can listen to some of those early records and think, well, I could have done this, could have done that. Uh, but any artist can do that. Any filmmaker can do that.
Yeah, and what I see with that resemblance is growth. You actually see yourself as a person grow by just reading your lyrics, whatever you wrote 10 years ago, even 15 years ago. That's a really cool thing to see. Now, before we move on, I got to ask you this because I've been on a James Cameron kick lately. So I got to ask,
Mm.
do you have a favorite James Cameron film, Scott? Because, the last one I saw, yes, I did see Titanic. Nothing to do with the events that happened earlier this summer, but that is actually a really good movie. I actually refocused like the shots that $1 million shot where it goes from Leo all the way around the ship to the stern. I love that shot, and I'm just appreciating it more and more the older I get. I saw it when I was like, it was 1997 when it came out, man. I was a young kid, didn't understand anything. I
Right.
just wanted to see a ship sink, and I have a whole different appreciation for movies. But James Cameron films, how do you feel about them? What's your favorite one?
He's a fantastic filmmaker. I think
Oh
he's
yeah,
the only filmmaker that has like two or three
yeah, and like the top
$2 billion
five, I
movies.
think that's probably like top five grossing films of all time. He has maybe top that
Three of
list.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know. Pretty amazing, honestly. But yeah, obviously, I mean, Terminator is amazing.
Yeah.
And he did he do the first Alien, right?
He did the second one. That's my favorite.
The second
Aliens.
one,
Yeah,
Aliens.
Aliens is in my top
Yeah.
10. Like out of all films, that film's just game over, man. Bill Paxton, rest in peace, the great Bill Paxton. But that movie does it for me for Aliens.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah, and then I mean, yeah, Titanic, of course, is obvious. I mean, it's like part of film history. I don't
Yeah.
find watching it, but obviously, it is an amazing film, epic film. I haven't seen the new Avatar, but I saw the first one.
It's really good.
I didn't go quite
Actually,
as crazy as everyone.
yeah, yeah. As far as like sequels go, I know we can talk about how great sequels are. Aliens is one of them. I thought Blade Runner 2049 was a better movie than the first one. That's just my opinion. But I think Avatar
Mm.
2 is better than the first one. It's actually that was it. It's about 3 hours long as Oppenheimer was, which I saw Oppenheimer last night on 70 Holy shit. That was probably
Uh,
the loudest movie I've ever seen in my life, if you haven't seen it yet. But
I haven't, no.
that nuclear explosion scene, we'll just wait for that. It's a thing of beauty. But hey, as far as metalheads, we can go as far as like loud noises forever. But now did you say aliens? I don't think did you even come up with a choice yet? Was it aliens
Yeah,
for you?
Aliens
Okay,
and
okay,
Terminator, I think would be my favorites.
okay. Yeah, check on that, man. Great movies. Now I gotta ask, alongside Sean and Corey and Fred, of course, you are now a five-piece, bud.
Hmm.
Adding guitarist Neil Timon. A shout out to Neil. He was one of the first guests we've ever had on Interview Under Fire when he was with Devil Driver. So shout out to that guy. You guys found a gem in him. Rounding you guys out to this new refined version, I feel like, of Carnifex. What new element does Neil bring, or maybe even brought back into the Carnifex lineup that you may not have had before, man?
Well, he's an amazing writer, which having another strong writer just makes everything better.
Yeah,
So having that really, it was obviously on the internal side the most noticeable. He's a great individual to be around, which when you're in a band, you guys might as well be married. It's like you're so close to someone and you're doing so much together so often, whether it be in the studio, on tour, travels, whatever it might be, that being a good person and being able to stand that person is like 80% of it. Like even if you like maybe you weren't the best guitarist, it's like, yeah, but he's really easy to hang out with, so let's just keep it this way. But he is also an amazing guitarist, which just makes everything better. And obviously his solos are really stand out, fantastic pieces. So we were happy to have all of his solos on the new record as well.
man, yeah, keep him for as long as you can because Neil was such a nice guy. Like I feel like we should just grab a beer and just sit down with him as opposed to just any other interview. He was a really nice guy, but I really love this new refined version of Carnifex. Now, I asked this to Sean last year when I interviewed him, and one of the things that makes Carnifex, I feel like, is the live presence that you guys exhibit on stage. That Dead in My Arms tour, holy shit. I don't know if you remember me. I was in the front going crazy in the pit, but you guys were with Spite last year when you guys came through. I believe
Mm-hmm.
it was a Southside Ballroom. I would also like to point out that you guys are all on this Necromanteum tour with Signs of the Swarm, To the Grave, and Last 10 Seconds of Life. Here's the thing, Scott. I ask a lot of questions about chemistry between different members of the same band, right? Like we just talked about. I always find those answers very interesting. But in this case, I do want to talk about the chemistry between the different bands on this upcoming tour because this is an important tour for a lot of deathcore diehards. Do you think it takes chemistry to make tours like this work? You've been on so many of them, but I feel like these bands that I just labeled off, it really shows how each band complements the other in the lineup. It's because we've had Bobby from Signs of the Swarm on our show. By the way, that's a great album. So many great albums this year. Their new album just dropped not too long ago. But chemistry, like, do you see that between like bands as opposed to just
Yeah,
within themselves?
absolutely. And when we're putting a tour together, that's like the thing we're thinking of the most is
Hmm.
is this experience in its totality. Not necessarily just hey, we're playing last. Like what are the biggest names we can get or whatever. We're
Yeah.
definitely thinking like what makes the best show. From when kids walk in the front door to when they go home. Uh, that's what we're after when we're trying to produce a tour. And so this was the lineup we had went after initially, and thankfully we were able to get every band that we went after on it. So I hope that it gives the fans a little bit different taste of all the bands, all the kinds of deathcore and extreme metal that's happening right now.
Yeah.
And to me, it's just one of those shows where every band sounds a little different, but I think for the most part, everyone is pretty much aware of, fans are aware of each different band and their own uniqueness.
Yeah, and I think you guys are coming through. Actually, the Dallas date is a unique one because it's the Monster Mosh Festival, which is going to be an all-day thing. I don't know if you know about this, but it's going to be packed, dude. I can't
Yeah,
wait
yeah,
to. I'll be there.
yeah.
It'll be good to. We haven't even met each other in person yet, and I've seen you so many times. I got to come and say hey to you, bud, because you've been so gracious to me for the last couple of years,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
let's get to Necromanteum, man. What do you think? This drops October 6th on Nuclear Blast Records. This is the 9th album. I thought it was just an amazing follow-up to Graveside. That's been in my rotation since the drop, dude. I think people will be very satisfied with this one. I actually believe you one-upped yourself with this record. Good luck on topping this one, because
Wonderful.
and I gotta say this, the challenges of keeping things fresh, right? After we talked about this earlier, 18 years with the same band. Do you feel any of that, the challenges? Is there something that you personally point to, Scott, mentally, that keeps those creative juices flowing for a band like Carnifex?
I think for us, we have always to kind of what I was saying. It's like you have to be able to put something out and then also look at it and say, it's I can do better. I can do better.
Mm.
And that's what we've really tried to do since our first album. Is every record we put out, our goal is to do a better version of that record, and it's itself in different ways. And obviously, music's subjective, so I'm sure there's people out there that would say not every record lasts, and I might even agree with them on a couple of records. But overall, I think that our goal has stayed the same, which is become better musicians and put out a better album each time we do a release. And so, in that sense, this record was no different than the others. Our goal was to write a better record than our last one.
Mm-hmm.
But having Neil in, working with Spencer, who did the orchestrations, and just trying to think of how we can improve upon the things that we do while also enjoying the songs that we write. I think we put that focus into every song, and it gave us a outcome. I think every song is pretty refined. Every song, I think, is definitely us. Also, not a Graveside B-side. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It sounds like a different album, which was our goal.
I wonder. I asked this question to a friend of mine recently, who was also on our podcast. At what point, as being a member of the band that's been there since the beginning, Scott, at what point do you stop and like feel a level of satisfaction once a record is, done? Or is it just already you're thinking about the next one? Do you just stop and be like, let's take a moment to appreciate this, man? I've been doing this for 18 fucking years,
Yeah. I mean, I'm already thinking about the next one. Actually, I already started writing stuff down for the next one. That's probably something I need to work on as far as like taking time to appreciate what we put out, because on the industry side, it's everything is focused on what's next, and no matter how good something is or how bad something is,
Yeah.
that you just have to be bigger, sell more tickets, get more streams, whatever, on the next one. And even if you have a record comes out and does amazing, it's like, oh, good for you. Next one better be bigger. Uh, and it's like that, like you're saying, 18 years, that way of thinking by the industry starts to get ingrained into your mind that no matter what you put out, it's not good enough. Your next thing needs to be bigger. And we're always like on this thin ice of like, if you ever do a tour or put a record out that doesn't perform as well as your last thing, then all the industry people are going to be going, I don't know, might be time to hang it up, because look at the numbers, your streams are down, your ticket sales are down, fill in the blank. And after 18 years, we've ridden those peaks and valleys. Like we put out Hell Chose Me, and that record was huge. It sold like over 40,000 copies and was on Billboard and all that stuff. And then until Feel Nothing came out, and it didn't perform as well. And so we had to ride those waves of what happens, how the industry reacts to you the second you do something that isn't going to make them more money than the last thing you did. And it's a very negative response, and it's probably like a
Mhm.
trauma response. I've been trained like, oh, you can't appreciate anything because no matter what you did, it's not enough. And that's unfortunately an unfortunate symptom of the music industry. There's kind of no getting away from it. It's the managers and the labels, they're heat-seeking missiles, and they just go to what's hot. And if
Yeah.
something's hotter than you, well, they just go to that. Like there's no thought to artistry or effort or intention. It's just what can I glom onto that is going to bring me the most revenue, period.
Yeah.
And if you did something that is big, they love you for that moment. And then if you can't follow it up with something bigger, well, why would they be interested in you? Right. I guess you've peaked. And so that attitude of the industry is kind of, we've been browbeat by that for so many years, so many labels, so many managers that that's just kind of how we think. And so it's like for me, I have this moment where the record's mine. It's when it's done, it's recorded, and we have all the finals back from the studio. It's totally finished. That's the finished record, but nothing's come out yet. So in the case of Necromanteum, we put our first song out July 24th, I think it was.
Yeah.
And we turned the record in at the end of April or April 15th, right in there. So my time with the record was April 15th to July 24th. That's when I loved it and enjoyed it. And then hey, July 24th came and went. The label has it. It's in the public's hands. I can't think about it anymore. Because if it does great, it doesn't matter because the next thing has to be better. And if it does horrible, it doesn't matter because the next thing has to be better. So I can't care about it anymore. I have to start
Mm.
working on what's next.
That's a very interesting perspective. I really appreciate you sharing all that, Scott. It's that time frame. Let's extend that. Remember that. Remember what you just said next time you take the
Yeah.
stage, because again, I'm just a fan. I don't know if my voice even matters, but I mean, from songs like 22 to title track to what is it? How the Knife Gets Twisted. I love that track, and all the way to Heaven and Hell all at once. Bro, and there's a solo that Neil plays at the end that I was like, holy shit, that just took Carnifex to a whole new level. There's this evolution to the band sound. I mean, I don't care who you are. That's not easy to do, putting out 9 albums in 18 years, yet here you are. And fans and even bands, they have even cited Carnifex as influential pieces and metal and music acts in the industry who have pushed them to where they are today. That's a fact. I mean, you look at all the YouTube comments. As a journalist, I do that. All the social media comments, how people are coming forward, the reception I've seen at these shows. I mean, it's insane. That's always an important thing to remember. Yeah, the industry's going to do what they're going to do, but may I remind you, you're here for a reason, bud, and I'm really happy to see where you're going. I'm excited to see where you go from here, dude. So I think you guys really are peaking at a really good point, at a really good time in your career. So I just wanted to extend
Well,
my
thank you.
appreciation. So, but
And your voice does matter because yeah, that's the thing. If we were just here for the industry, I mean, I'd be gone, right? It's
hmm,
the industry's it's thankless. Like they don't. I mean, I got horror stories for you. How we've had managers where we've paid them hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of years,
geez.
and then you still find out they're just completely unethical, only in it for the money. They're talking all this shit behind your back the first second they can, and you're just like, wow. So we're just a money source to these people. They don't care about us as people. They don't care about our art. They don't care about what we're trying to do. They certainly don't care about the fans. And that's another point of contention with the industry. The industry has a very negative view of fans, which I've been out and I've met hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fans, and they are literally the only reason we keep coming back. And so for the industry to always look down on them the way they do, I just it's this dichotomy that really bugs me about being in the music industry sometimes. Is I love being on stage, I love creating, I love the art, and I love the fans. But the institutions we have to do it through are awful.
I understand, man. That's really great insight, dude. These shows, fans are painting their faces. I've never painted my face before, Scott. Maybe for like one football game in the past, but I'll do it for you guys when you guys come through in October.
Hell yeah.
But I gotta get into this because I want to get into this is a really cool part of Carnifex. I've always appreciated. We talked about movies, right? Dude,
Mm-hmm.
getting into this interesting theme for the album here because the lyricism throughout Necromanteum, and I'm just gonna read this off here because it was so intriguing. You could just make this into a movie, a room filled with mirrors, and using that medium to speak to the dead and other dimensions. Like, dude, holy shit! You painted this whole illustration for me in my head mentally that I'm just like, that dark theme. I just saw Hereditary recently, so I'm just like thinking like that house with the mirrors all around, and
Yeah.
it presents the concept. What I'm trying to get at is presents the concept is what if you could use that kind of room to do that? Speak to the dead. What secrets of the world could you uncover from a direct conversation with a Green Reaper? Like, how do you come up with that concept, bro? I mean, not a monster, but like a fellow intellect. I begin to think of like the tangibles of theme or messages to your music. If that's always like a big component of songwriting for a band like Carnifex, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I think,
We need the
I
wings for
think,
this.
I think like you could think about if death is eternal, which I suppose it is, right? It's been there
Mm-hmm.
since time. Um, Maybe it has this amazing insight. And I know, obviously, even to this, throughout the evolution of human history, we don't really know what or who God is or how it's manifested, if it's manifested at all.
Yeah.
There's all these different world religions. You have a billion people think this, a billion people think that, a billion people think something else. So there is no consensus on what comes next. And it's almost like, what if death is God, and not in this awful way of like, the devil or anything like that.
Hmm.
But what if death is that duality? What if death is God and the devil, right? And something just are, and it's not because death doesn't come after you because you're a bad person. It's just your fate. Um, and I guess it's kind of like metaphysical type stuff as far as that idea of, when we cross over, is is it just a light switch just gets turned off and that's it, your story's done, you're forgotten, or does our energy go somewhere? And when you kind of look into some of the stuff they're doing with like really this wild cutting edge science, it's like they can split an atom, they
Hmm.
can take that atom to a completely different part of this research facility, and when they move that atom, the other one they split it with moves in tandem. I don't know how you explain that. I mean, that's, to me, that's just puts your mind in a pretzel. It's like, well, what else could that mean, right? And if our bodies are just made up of atoms, which they are, I mean, what does that mean after we die, right? I mean, is there this mirrored existence somewhere we can't see? I don't know. So that's a lot of what the record is questioning. Now, the idea is, what if you could sit down and talk to death, this sort of great arbiter that doesn't necessarily have a dog in the fight. They don't want to see you really live, but they have this observation. They have the benefit of observation. They have the answers from all these, hundreds and millions of life and death. And to me, that just seemed like an interesting topic.
Jeez, you can't even see it, but I got goosebumps right now. I'm thinking about as you're talking about this, they're coming out with some of these movies where you're able talk to me, that movie that just came out about speaking to the dead through a some kind of, have you seen the trailer for this? It's insane. It's an Australian movie
I haven't.
and
No.
it's got like a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes anyway, but the point is like you're talking to the dead through a vessel, and
Mm.
you see what I'm saying. It's like as you're just talking about the concept of necromantium, I'm thinking about, man, there's so many different ways. I've never been I've never had the balls to actually go in and do that, like go and talk to the dead. I mean, my brother has. Maybe I can
Mm.
reach out to him. Yeah, I just spoke with Scott of Carnifex, and this is what he talked to me. He's like, "What? Scott told you that? We got to do that." So, but that is a very like that's a very like conceptual theme. Like it goes very intellectual too. Just the whole part about you talking about splitting the atom. That's a very I didn't think about that until you even like brought it up. But I feel like we could go down that rabbit hole even further and further. But man, I appreciate you sharing all that. But hey, I want to talk
Yeah.
about the themes of Necromantium. You just, I'm gonna blast it in my car again later today with a whole different train of thought, and who knows where I'll be,
Yeah.
hopefully.
I
But
mean, and that's the thing. It kind of starts with Torn in Two. You know, that song Torn in Two is really about
God,
that duality.
what a great track to open up. Whoever decision was that? I was like, the album just flowed so relentlessly. Sorry, I just had to praise you on the
Oh yeah.
structure of the album because it was so great. It's my
Yeah,
second favorite on
and
there. Anyway, go ahead.
Sean
Torn
and
in
I
two.
sequenced it. Oh well, it's just yeah, that's kind of a great kickoff for the record, obviously musically, but also lyrically, because it really starts to delve into the duality of the whole record. How I was saying, like, you know, what if death is this impartial arbiter, and what if death is God and the devil in
Hmm.
one? You know, and we just our brains just can't quite figure it out, or fathom such a thing. And from there, you know, a lot of the other songs have different questions and kind of different ideas, and then where it ultimately ends up is my answer to that question is heaven and hell all at once. And the line in the chorus there is all the gods, all the heavens, all the hells are inside you.
Yeah.
And that was kind of where I arrived at the end of the record, which is, look, we're all of these things. You know, we can be good, we can be evil, we can be anything. And I think all of those facets are in us, and it really just comes down to what we choose to put out there and be. And I don't believe anyone's inherently good or inherently evil, just like I don't believe death is inherently good or inherently bad. It really all just comes down to what you choose to be and how you choose to view it.
Man, great insight, man. I will never listen to these songs the same way again, especially after these last 30 minutes. But Scott, I know we've covered a great deal of topics on our conversation here. It's always great to have you back here. And the discussions we've had, right, are just so in-depth and enjoyable. You being so true to yourself and sharing your stories, your IUF on our publication. You make my job easy, dude. Like, I can't wait to see you guys here in Dallas soon. I mean, and shout out to Sean also when I had him last year. But here you are, right? Almost 2 decades with Carnifex now, 9 full-length albums, touring, the industry that you just talked about, even your growing fan base, your relationship with the music, your bandmates, even yourself. And I said this earlier, I think we're entering an important part in, and not just the band's career, but you as well. It, as I round out this interview here, I'm going to let you go off to your next one. What do you see as the most rewarding part for someone like you who is now at this point in their life? You know, because you're also seeing results, which is definitely an inspiration to what you're doing.
The most important part to me is the relationships with the people we've reached.
Hmm.
So being able to have this conversation with you, you know, you said earlier, like we never actually met in person, but look at how we're able to sit here and like have such specific, in-depth conversation that we
Yeah.
both relate to and get. That moment right there really encapsulates the value of being a musician, which is I can have conversations with people I hadn't met until that very moment, and somehow we're both exactly on the same page, talking about the exact same thing, and we both get it. I mean, think about how rare that occurs in society, where oh, I've never met this person, but we're just going to instantly dive into this conversation and both totally get each other. That's like not a thing, you know,
Yeah.
outside of music. And so for me, really, it's the relationships with the people that our music has reached. That is the single driving factor in why we keep doing it and why it has value.
And I will also add that if it wasn't for the music that you put out alongside some other bands that obviously you see out on my wall, I wouldn't be where I am today. So, again, I've said this before. I'll say it again. Much appreciation to everything you've done throughout your career. I didn't even say this, but I'm such a nerd. I'm wearing a Wayland Utani shirt. I talked Aliens as my favorite movie. But anyway, I'm wearing a Wailing Utani shirt
Yeah,
from the movie. I just realized that.
that's awesome.
It was great nerding out with you, man, and talking about film and everything you've done. But do you have any just last words, just any shout outs, anything else you'd like to plug in or mention as far as Carnifex or maybe new music video? I don't know what you can or cannot say, but the floor is yours, bud.
Yeah, we're gonna have another single coming out August 25th. It's the single that features Tom Barber from Chelsea Grin and Darko.
Yes, I
So
forgot about that. We
yeah,
talked
check
about
that
so
one
many
out.
things. There's so many. We left out so many topics, but another great song. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so check that out August 25th. Records out October 6th. We're back on tour October 11th. If you want to stream the record, hit it up on Spotify or Apple Music. And if you want to support the band, grab a shirt or vinyl off of our any merch store.
Right on, buddy. And everyone's listening. This is Scott Ian Lewis from Carnifex, and Necromanteum drops October 6th on Nuclear Blast Records. Please do me and Scott a favor. Check them out live, please, because they are a thing of beauty, and you will not stop moshing. And buy the record if you can, because the bands can't do it without your help. Scott, I'm old fashioned. I'll still buy records that's sitting in the corner of my room even today. So I'm as more digital we get, the more old fashioned I get. I guess I'm going the opposite direction. But and everyone's listening. You can listen to this podcast on all major podcast streams out there. Check us out at interviewunderfire.com. Scott, much love, man. Nothing but the best for you and your bandmates from here on out. I'll see you in a couple months. All right, let's stay in touch.
Awesome, man. Take care. See ya.
All right, later. Bye-bye.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to Interview Under Fire podcast. If you guys liked what you heard, please subscribe and share our channel. And please leave a 5-star review, as that helps us tremendously. If you'd like to check out more, visit www.interviewunderfire.com or our social media channels on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And finally, we want to thank you all for the support you've been giving us. Keep it burning.